Hi, I'm Chris Gilpin and I'm here to answer your questions on behaviour management. Okay, so this question comes from Jane J. It says, how do I better structure my lessons to help with behaviour? I like this question because it puts the behaviour straight on the structure of the lesson. What can I think about before I even walk into the classroom? I think some teachers are very reactive rather than proactive when it comes to behaviour. It's really important that you keep a step ahead of what the behavioural concerns will be. Every lesson that I teach, I make absolutely sure that I know what's going to happen when students do tasks, what's going to happen when I want silence, what's going to happen when students finish their task early or don't understand their task. And this is the sort of things you need to be thinking about. Now, obviously, this is I'm going to answer this question on the basis that it is a classroom lesson with PE lessons and lessons outside of the classroom. I can't think of any others, though I'm sure there's loads. Then your structure of the lesson will not be necessarily what I'm going to go through, but you can adapt it for your needs. I'm very much fond of the sort of three-part lesson. Three-part lesson is basically a starter, the lesson and plenary. So the starter for me is an opportunity to settle the students down. A lot of the lessons, oddly enough, I teach this year, for instance, are lessons in which they've just come from PE. This means they've been running around and then suddenly they've got to do a classroom sort of environment lesson where they've got to sit and write. And for some students, this is going to be quite an adaptation that they've got to do in their heads, that I'm not running around anymore, I'm now sitting working. Evolutionarily speaking, we're not built to do an hour of running around and then an hour of sitting down calm in the classroom. Our brains, our bodies, everything doesn't work like that. You build up adrenaline and then you want to release it for the rest of the day. You go out hunting, you do it for hours and hours on end until it's dark. And then maybe you'll think in the evening. So perhaps cavemen did think, I don't know what they thought about, how to do a cave drawing or whatever it was. So we're not built for it, so we've got to plan it into our lessons. Now if you've got a period one lesson, it's not going to be a problem. But if your lesson's after break, after lunch, then the same thing might occur. There are still some students who play football and do activities in the break and lunchtime. There are other students who sit down reading a book, so you don't necessarily need to worry about them too much of settling them down. So starter needs to be something that everyone can access first of all. Don't make it really difficult starter or a really challenging question from last lesson. Make it something that everyone can do straight away without needing any help. If there's an explanation attached to it, you are putting yourself through a lot more effort than you need to. At the start of the lesson, I want to be doing the register. I want to be picking up people for their homework and chatting to people and saying, that thing you said you were doing last night, how did that go, etc. And building up relationships with the students. You don't want to be worrying about the student that come in a little bit late and having to explain it to them. So on the board, title, date, lesson objective, whatever your school asks you to do or whatever you feel is appropriate. But a quick thinking activity that anyone can access, right, here's a picture, write down words that describe that picture. Well, anyone can do that. If it's maths, for instance, maybe doing square numbers. Right, I want you to do square numbers from 1 to 15 and do the first one for them. 1 times 1 equals 1, 2 times 2 equals 4, etc. And they can easily replicate the other ones. There is still challenge there, 14 squared, 15 squared, it's difficult, okay, but you've got them instantly working straight away. So the idea really is to get them in, sitting down, working as quickly as you can. Passing out books, is that necessary? No, I've never passed out books in my life. Put books at the front desk, all labelled so they can see their names, so stack them in an order which they can see their names. Do that at the start of each lesson, then that's there, they collect it in and they get in that routine. Get them to get any textbooks or worksheets or whatever you're doing for that lesson themselves, and then you don't have to worry. So they've come in, they've got their book, they've got their textbook, worksheet, whatever it is, they've sat down and they open their books and they do the title, starter, date, whatever. Not always. It takes training. You need to train them into doing that. Now, all I say at the start of my lessons, sort of a couple of minutes in, is well done to the 7 people who have got their books open and are doing the starter. That's all I need to say. The reason that's so effective is that's highlighting the people that are doing it and not punishing the people that aren't. If I was to say, why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing it? Straight away, I've started that lesson off negatively. And students will remember that. So you want to be positive. Well done to the 7 people who have got their books open and are doing the starter. Really positive start. Because as soon as I say that, almost everyone gets their books open and start. Now, if there is an issue, you can highlight it. I walk over to them and go, are you okay? What's going on? Oh, I've forgotten my pen or whatever. And, oh, well, see if you can borrow it off someone or whatever. Or give them a pen or whatever it is you do in your school. So it's not starting off negatively, it's starting the lesson off positively. Now, when they've done the starter, and I'll make sure I say to them, right, you've got 4 minutes or 5 minutes. We're going to start this at 22. We're going to start the lesson. Mark it if appropriate. I don't ever like students doing work that's not been marked themselves so that they can see straight away whether we've understood it. Get some students to get responses in. What did you think of that picture? What word did you come up with? Or who got up to 15 squared, or whatever it is. And then start the lesson. And my lesson starts on Notes 1. Notes 1 is an explanation of what they're doing for the first task. It's a written example, but I make a big deal how I've crunched everything down into a really small bit of writing. And they realise that they're not having to copy a whole load of stuff. It's just a minimised version of it. All written subjects, you can do this. Whether it's English, science, French, or whatever the subject is, you can create, or you can have a really big question. You don't want them to copy it down, and then minimise it to a small point. Now, the reason for this is if they are copying, then you know who is playing ball in your lesson. You know who is going to follow your instructions, who's going to do the work. If they aren't copying, you know straight away within the first 5 minutes of your lesson, you know straight away who's not going to play ball and who's not going to be doing work for you that lesson. That gives you a lot of time to deal with it. And I walk around the room during notes. I give a quick explanation, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then I walk around the room to see who's playing ball. Now, the most important thing for behaviour management is for the teacher to shut up. And that sounds rude. Everyone says, oh, what? Shut up is quite rude. Shut up is not something I would ever say in a classroom, because students absolutely pick up on it because they think that they see it as being incredibly rude, and quite a lot of adults do as well. What I mean by that is a whole load of lessons I've observed, the failure of behaviour in that lesson is because the teacher will not stop talking, will not stop going through a task or activity or whatever they're explaining. We as teachers love our own voices, and whether you admit to it or not is up to you, but we do love our own voices. We also love our subject, and we also love sharing the knowledge of our subjects. We cannot stop talking about how much we love our subject and all the bits about the subject, which is fascinating to us, but not so fascinating all the time to all the students. I never talk for more than 5 minutes if I can get away with it, which is most of the time. For revision lessons, going through papers, I end up breaking that rule, but I think there's a real good reason why you break the rule. But for a normal standard lesson, if you're talking for more than 5 minutes, you are talking too much, way too much, and you're giving a chance to for behaviour issues to occur. Students will give you some time. They will give you 5 minutes. With training, they will give you 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, the worst students in a classroom will start pushing their luck, and then the mid students will start pushing their luck. And then even the best behaved students will think, oh, right, okay, well, if they're doing it, I'm going to do it. And start talking, get phones out, whatever it is. So keep your talking down to maximum 5 minutes. And if you need to time it, put your phone on your desk, start the time when you start talking, let it go off. I haven't tried this, but it would be interesting to see what happens. If you let the students know, right, I'm going to be talking for 5 minutes, and I'm going to stop and let you get on with it when that 5 minutes is up. And anything I've not gone through, I will go around and I'll explain to you, or let me know if there's anything I haven't gone through. I don't do that. I mean, I think after 9 years, I more or less know where 5 minutes is up. I also have a clock on the back of the room, so I'm just sort of take a mental note where the big hand is, and then try and make sure I stop when the 5 minutes is up. I think that's really important, and I think that's somewhere where most teachers fall into who are having behaviour issues. So you've got them started on the tasks. They've all copied down the notes, and occasionally there's a few that are just finishing it off. Then start them on the task. Tasks, for me, generally are maximum 10 minutes long. Maximum. Any longer than 10 minutes, the students who have behaviour issues will start to feel that they don't need to do it now. There's no urgency. They feel, well, if it's half an hour task, I can start it in quarter of an hour's time and still get it done. And obviously we all know that that's not necessarily what happens. So give them maximum 10 minutes. If you can do a 5-minute task, do it. If you can cut it down into each question and say, right, you've got 2 minutes on this question, you've got 2 minutes on the next one. The issue with that is you don't want to stop them too much. If you stop them too much, you're starting to break the lesson up into too many chunks, and some students don't like having to stop and start and stop and start. So 5 minutes talking and note taking and 10 minutes task. For most schools that's going to be a 3 cycle, for some schools 4 cycle, 4 times you can stop and go through that. And that's it. Plenary, at the end, a quick question on the board, if it's appropriate, a GCSE question, and you can say, right, now let's try this on the actual GCSE question, or Key Stage 2 exam, SATS exam question, or whatever it is you might want to do. And then they can say, oh, okay, well, let's see if we can do this. When they've marked their work, and they mark their work for me after all the times they do the tasks, I build in 2 minutes for them to look at the back of the books, or look at the answers I've given them, or look at the answers I've put up on the board and mark their work. For more written subjects, you can share books and peer assess and self-assess and all that business. When at the end of the lesson, when they've marked their book and they've written down a comment for how the lesson went or how they feel the lesson went, and for the comments, make sure you say that you don't want I should do more work, that's specific on the lesson, that they use the key terms. At the end of the lesson, you want them to pack up their books, all in a neat pile at the front, and they do that, and sitting down ready to go. And this is the last point I want to make. Sitting down ready to go. Some schools, some teachers, for whatever reason, get them to stand behind their desks. For me, that's absolutely crazy. You don't want them out of their seats. That just causes you more problems than it's worth. You want them sitting down. Some teachers, bless them, get them to stand up behind their chairs, or in fact don't. They just say, right, stand up, ready to go. And I try and go in there in the lesson when it's just the bell's about to go to talk to the teacher, and they're all crowded around the door. Get them to sit down. It cuts all of that out. It gets them in a specific area they can't walk around, and get them to sit in their seats. Some of them will try and move close to the front. They're clever like that sometimes. Get them to sit in their seats. Right, I'm not letting anyone go until you sit in your seats. Or try and make an individual punishment. As you know, I don't like classroom punishments, but sometimes when it's a few seconds, you can use the peer pressure of the room to just guide those students into their seats. So I hope that's been helpful. If there are any other questions on that, please message me or go to the website. And if you want to read more about behavioural teaching, then read my book on Amazon. Thank you very much.